Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and today I'll be guiding our discussion. Well, folks, hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. You know, lately in the news, I've seen a lot, I guess you could say for the last month or more, off and on, whether it be on YouTube or in the news and so on. This Three Eye Atlas, right? This supposed comet slash whatever question mark, right? And there's been this connotation or this notion, right, that this could be an intelligence, that there's an intelligent civilization that may have sent this, or it may be on this or part of this or whatever, right? And most of my videos, pretty much we dive into organizational culture, right? We start there and we kind of ripple outward into the rest of culture and our own lives, right? In a healthy way. Just to reflect. If anything else, just to talk about some things to make us think and to kind of get us to reflect. And then through that process, we can transform of our own volition, right? This is a little different. This is a little bit of a, right turn on an off ramp here to talk about some things that aren't usual, right? Or are they, right? You know, we go back in time, there's pictures all over, whether it be ancient humans who drew these pictures or carved them out in stone, etc., in caves and on rock walls, and even Da Vinci, I believe it was, who put them in paintings, these UFO type situations, right, in paintings and so on. And so all of this stuff is not new, folks. This has been clearly going on for hundreds or thousands and thousands of years. And the interesting thing that I find fascinating, and this is really from a sociological perspective, right, is how we are guarding ourselves in fear, right? Think about it. Why would and I'm taking this perspective to talk about it in this way. And keep in mind when I'm talking about things, this is clearly just a sandbox of ideas and thoughts, okay? This isn't me making a judgment for, against, up, down, whatever, just talking about the topic. But when you pan back out a little bit, what would be, why would this upset anything to do with culture? This whole notion that a intelligence equal to or that surpasses us would either visit us or may have already visited us and maybe are already a part of our culture now, right? And we don't even know it. And this opens up a lot of conversational doors, right? This goes down some dusty trails we didn't really maybe think to consider, or we've thought to consider, but for fear, people gaslight themselves out of what? Conversation. I've always said, folks, look, if you're afraid to talk about any topic, that's where your fear is, right? This goes right back to the notion of, if you go back to Joseph Campbell, where your fear lies, that's where your breakthrough lies, right? That's where you go through that portal, you address your fear, and that's on the other side is breakthrough. It doesn't mean you will never have fear again, but understanding why can alleviate some of that fear, right? Well, so let's pan back out again. So why would the existence of any intelligent other than, say, human beings create so much fervor or controversy or well, that's conspiracy, or that's this, or that's, it's interesting that there's some people who claim that regular humans are coming up with all kinds of conspiracy theories and all that, that some of those same people are fully of the idea that we're not alone, right? Can't both be true, right? And oh, by the way, conspiracy theory implies that there is a malevolent purpose. So if there's any conspiracy, if there's a conspiracy, it would be anything to do with fear comes from a malevolent place, okay? Why is that? Ignorance, right? Don't all things that really occur that are negative come from ignorance, right? I'm not saying this in a judgmental way. I'm saying, look, if I don't understand how a car works and I've never driven one, and and I haven't taken the time to figure it out, and I jump in and I just start messing with things, something bad's going to happen, right? And that came about because of what? Ignorance. I just jumped in and started doing stuff, right? It's kind of how human beings progressed, right? We've gotten to where we've arrived to where we are now largely because of ignorance. Many failures to find success, right? Anyway, let's get back on track here. So why the fear? Why the fear? Let's peel into this. Man, this goes so deep into the psychology and the sociology of us as human beings. What are we afraid of? Well, let's hit it a couple notches at a time. Let's work our way in. Let's peel that onion inward a little bit. Let's start with faith, right? So, is our faith only bound to this planet? Is it only bound to this planet? If the divine, and I hesitate to say the G-O-D word because it comes from the G-A-D word, which is from a negative connotation, so I prefer divine. It encapsulates the singularity, right? But if the divine essentially is the all, right? Doesn't that include all of the universe, all space, all planets? There could be billions. We could just be one experiment out of like many, many billion, right, folks? And even in our science fiction, we talk about multiverses and all that. Well, take those billions and multiply that times more billions then, right? So really, when you boil it down, is your divine only limited to this planet? And if so, is it truly the divine? Or could you be being deceived, right? Are you being deceived? These are questions we have to ask ourselves. Will we ever fully know? We may never know. We probably will never know. Space, universe, too big for us to fully know, right? So the fear that, well, we're just it, really comes from an egocentric, right? An egocentrism, really, right? That somehow, human beings are it. We're it. We're that. That's it. Well, we may be it right here, right? But we may not be it over there and over there and over there and over there. And perhaps we're supposed to progress it along at such and start to ascend, really, right? Transformation, think about it. Ascend in our character and in our behavior and in our love toward and one another and all of that, right? To then be able to reach out and touch someone across the space and time, right? Maybe we have to earn that right, and perhaps earning that right means we have to learn to get along, folks. I mean, think about it. We apply the same standards that we would apply to a daycare, right, or any school for the youth, up and coming, right? Any standard we would apply to them, we completely throw away as a culture and as a globe, right? We've completely thrown it away. Why? What are we afraid of? Well, it comes back to, because I'm afraid, I have to what? The only way I can handle fear is to control, right? The more control I have over my life and over the situation, the less fear I'll have. It's actually further from the truth. The more control you think you have, the more you're deluding yourself, and the more that subconsciously those fears are never going to go away. They just keep clawing at you. The only way to alleviate fear is to deal with it head on. This is why I say, folks, you have to be willing to talk about. If you can't talk about anything, if things are taboo about this and taboo about that and taboo, it doesn't mean you have to believe in a thing. It doesn't have to, you have to participate in a thing. But if you can't have a discussion about a thing, that is where your fear is. And sometimes our fear is where our ignorance is. Sometimes our fear is where we're least, and I don't mean to throw ignorant in a malicious way. I'm saying that's where we're least knowledgeable, least experienced, right? Least comfortable, right? We want comfortable. look, folks, if we, look through these telescopes, and we've got planets that are, hot gases, some that are cold rocks, da, da, da. If anything, the universe has told us is that there's nothing comfortable in totality, right? We are surrounded by uncomfortability. Now, it doesn't mean we shouldn't try to make life comfortable. I'm not saying that we shouldn't. We should. But we shouldn't be so overly anxious and bit down and just tense about it that fear comes in and we have to over control. We're trying to control our way out of fear, right? Even the fear of, well, how am I living my life? And people are judging me. I mean, that's a big one. Are people judging me? You know what? People are going to judge you whether you care about it or not, quite honestly. Why do you think most people just live their life and they don't really care about all the crap that's floating around out there? Because they know that most people are judging them anyway, and they're like, well, go ahead. I'm just going to, live my life, and there you go. You find that some of the people with the least amount of fear are the ones who are least obsessed, the least overwrought with all the systemic things that try to impose themselves. So as regards to faith, if you can't love your neighbor, look, folks, your neighbor could be a billion light years or a trillion light years away, right? Whatever, right? Whatever the maximum could be, if there is, right? It says neighbor. It didn't say neighbor. It could be 10 feet away from your house. It could be 10 billion light years away, right? Neighbor. Basics, folks, basics. Alleviate your fear. Start to address that. So there's one element of our concern about another intelligence that might be out there, right? Or here already. I mean, look at our technology. Look at the advancements we've made in a short amount of time. Look, folks, we've already seen where technology, and if you do a little digging yourself, you'll find that telepathy is right around the corner if it's not already here. They're already finding breakthroughs. Do you think, granted, there are woo-woo magicians out there who are just playing tricks on people. We know that. It's always happened. That's always been the way. Charlatans and so forth, right? But there are people who have come up with some amazing things, and even government programs, right? I'm not going to name names and talk. It's already out there. I'm not here to elevate that. What I am here to say is, look, folks, telepathy is already out there. So if you're sitting there having a thought, how do you know it's your thought? How do you know that intuition or that thought that comes into your head was your thought, right? And by thoughts, let's relegate it to ideas, right? Hey, I have an idea. I came up with this great idea, right? Well, some other folks who came up with some great ideas through meditating, right? And doing thought experiments for hours. Einstein, thought experiments for hours. Tesla, who meditated and thought about it for hours. Who else did things for, a long time? Christ. Just go through history. Do your own research, folks. The knowledge is out there. The divine is not preventing us from finding the knowledge and the insight that we need to find, right? So what is your intuition? I come back to this. What is your intuition saying about another intelligence being out there? If you're like, nope, it could never happen. Well, hold on a second. We can't speak in absolutes. Why? Because this is the whole get in the car, don't know how to drive it scenario. If I speak it, oh, I can drive that car, or that thing, that thing is just a giant paperweight, right? When we judge in absolutes like that, then we cut ourselves off from learning. We cut ourselves off from figuring things out, right? Exploring and going through the adventure of life to discover things, right? And this is what broadens us as people. This is what transforms us as a culture. This is what grows us. And so this whole notion that another intelligence, and I'm using intelligence because what if it's a rock? Right? What if that intelligence, we can play with this in our sci-fi. A rock, that has a thought, right? Well, a rock can't have a thought. Really? A plant can have a thought. We've already figured out that plants are living organisms, right? We've already figured out that mushrooms and all these things that have permeated that we may be of them, right? And their network, and they communicate in a network. But to stand back and look at it, you wouldn't necessarily have that thought, right? Why? It's back to that, car, don't know how to drive it scenario, right? Or don't even know what it is scenario, right? Giant paperweight, pretty cup holder, I can put my stones in the back of that truck, I can stack stuff in it, and hundreds or thousands of years go by until I figure out, oh wait, I think this might actually do something else, right? Why? Because it takes us a while to walk around things to figure it out. And there's an intellectual maturing that has to occur. What do you think has been happening to us for hundreds and thousands of years? An intellectual maturing. We've had emotional maturing, but it seems like we stopped short of the big lessons. Love thy neighbor. Seems to fall right off when it comes to the things I'll do not to love my neighbor, right? To encroach on their property, right? To steal their inheritance, right? To dupe family members, to dupe friends, to dupe your community, to dupe people who work for you, right? To cheat people, to all the malicious things that happen on a daily basis all over the globe, constantly, right? Whether it be organized or random and disorganized, right? So intellectual maturity, emotional maturity, right? We're so fascinated to go like, well, how can we get fit, stay young, live longer? How can we get smarter, be more emotionally present, more engaged, more empathetic, right? More loving, more kind, right? These tend to take the third, fourth, and fifth slots versus the first, second, and third slot, right? Now, we can't throw safety out the window. Now, there is the potential, as there is always the potential, that an other intelligence may not have fancy ideas toward us. Look, colonization of the United States, I'm sure that that didn't feel so good to the natives that lived here either, right? Let's just go back in history and peel that onion back. Does that mean that those Native Americans were kind and friendly to one another? No, just like we aren't either, right? But they definitely weren't prepared for colonization, right? So we look back and then we take the framing of ourselves, what would we do? And then we project that onto another. Well, do you think in it, and I'm not saying yes or no here, it's just for us to ponder and consider. Do you think another intelligence that could have probably come in and just completely wiped us out, if they chose to do so, wouldn't have already done so? I mean, and all the things in between that they could do, right? Or do nothing at all, or groom us along and to make us part of the family, right? Hey, you can't be part of this organization, right? We'll say that there's a giant organization in the universe. You can't be a part of this organization till you can elevate your culture to a place where you're not just completely lethal to one another. That's a challenge, folks. That's a challenge. But we see our little planet through a straw. We're not seeing it. If people want to throw the divine out there, do you think the divine sees things through a straw, right? Like we do? Probably not, right? I mean, absolutely not, right? But we do. We see things through a straw. My yard, my house, my room, my block, my this, my. What's the common theme? My. It's an ownership. I need to be able to own my space, and then what? Why is that? Fear. It's fear-based. Own my space. It's one thing to say this is my gift. While I'm here, this is my gift. I'm going to be a great steward and preserver of this gift. That's how you should see it. Why don't we see our own lives the same way, right? My is this fear-based culture that we have. And we have to be guarded against that. Because if we're not, what sneaks in and takes over is this trickles down. And it's trickled down through the many generations, right? To where you see this happen, and then it cultivates a whole new generation of turmoil and tumult, right? It just changes angles a little bit, changes perspectives, like a cut on a diamond, just another facet of the same malevolence, right? That we can be toward one another. Why? Because I set myself apart as special to those people, or to those people, or to those people, right? The racists, right? You think a racist is bad? Well, what's the next thing that's not so great but better than a racist? Somebody who's honest about it, right? Not fun either, but also better. At least I know who hates me, right? At least I know who's discriminating against me. Ageism, right? Sexism, ageism, all the isms, right? Isn't it kind of sick and sad we have all that? Now, if you're another intelligence and you're cruising by and you're taking a glimpse with your telescope and listening and all that, and you're going, okay, well, they're still stumbling and fumbling over themselves, but they're trying, right? So this is where the hope side of the conversation comes in. We have to keep trying, folks. We have to keep working on ourselves. We have to keep working on our ability to unite and come together and be more neighborly, right? Loving our neighbor and more in tune with the divine, right? And I don't care about the little g's. I'm talking about the universal, right? The universal, okay? Universal doesn't give a crap about your yard, doesn't care about your block, doesn't care about if our little nickel on our little dime. I'm not saying it doesn't care at all, but probably a lesser priority versus whole cultures who are starving, right? Those are probably bigger on our list of to-dos, right? So folks, why then is an other intelligence scary? Well, it challenges our specialness. But does it? I mean, really, does it? Do you think? It's like, if, I've got 3 children. And while we can joke around with our kids and say, oh, you're my favorite, you're my favorite. They're all my favorites. I love them all. They're all different, right? They're all different. And I only have 3. There's some people that have like 5, or, my grandparents had 10. 10. Can you believe that? 10? Oh my gosh. Anyway. But can you imagine have 10 different personalities, 10 completely different humans, right? Do you love any one of them any less? Even for their faults. They all have faults. They're just different faults. They all have strengths. They're just different strengths. They all have sweetness in them, and they're all just a different sweetness, right? And some struggle more than others, but they struggle with what? Joy. They're joyful, but they're struggling, right? There's beauty in all of it, right? Don't you think the divine sees us in the same way? Don't you think that if we pan back, there's nothing really to be afraid of another intelligence out there? If anything, our fear gives us away. Our fear and our distrust really shows, would really demonstrate to any other intelligence that, well, we'll just take a peek as we're driving by, we'll make a wide swing through the solar system. We'll come back in another 10,000 years, right? There's some people who are like, fine, go away, 10,000 years, we'll get to totally dominate, destroy our culture and all the things, right? There are some people who have malevolent intent and they go on about their business. But how do you know, and this is another fun part of the equation, another door to open, is how do you know they're not already here? How do you don't know that they haven't already assimilated within our culture to begin with? How do you know they haven't been teaching and guiding us the whole way? Or at least during segments of our development? How do you know that some of the ideas that we have, not all, but some of those ideas, haven't been some that they put in our head or synergized, within groups and dynamics, right, to escort us along, right? We don't know that. And we can be grateful in the unknowing, in not knowing, I should say, but not be afraid of it. That would be the least overt way that another intelligence could assimilate in over time, is to get folks confident in feeling better about what they could come up with and striving. Well, so-and-so came up with it, right? Hey, Einstein came up with this. So what? Then you have a horde of scientists, after that come along going, oh, well, what else can we figure out about this? And we start picking it apart and we find out more on our own, right? So it could be just drops in the bucket. We don't know. But But to say or to be fearful of, or for, and then that's, come back to the governmental side of the house. Why would a government be afraid of another intelligence? Well, let's say that there are some malevolency out there that they've discovered that they didn't tell us about. Well, do they now assume that all are malevolent until proven otherwise, right? Or maybe they're not malevolent or benevolent, they're not bad or good. They're neutral, right? They're just like, whatever. They're just like, we're like birds to them, or sea turtles. It's like, oh yeah, turn the lights down when we're going across, by the beach because we don't want to, these humans straying off and jumping off a cliff because they're, XYZ confused, right? They don't know how to operate that truck. So don't leave your spaceship parked on the beach because one of them will take the thing and create chaos and mayhem. Whatever, right? Having a little levity there, but you get the idea. The idea is that why would a government lock that down? Because there may be some benevolence, and that benevolence could be not benevolence, but malevolence. If there's malevolence out there, then that could be what? Create a fear, right? That could amplify a fear. And so you might have to go, well, maybe that's good not to know if there's some malevolence. Because to understand that there were some out there would mean that we'd have to understand that there's some who are benevolent, right? Or at least neutral. And that's a good thing, right? But then always with the flip side comes the malevolence. But there's some who are malevolent or mostly malevolent or, malevolent by absence of being good. They just don't care. They're just manipulators. We'll say the narcissists of the universe, right? They're just cruising around going, hey, what resources can I take and steal and da-da-da-da. And it may be that we don't have a way to deal with that. And our government doesn't want to potentially talk about that stuff. That's possible, right? We don't know. That's the other part of this, folks. We don't know, but we can't assume either. So to assume that there's malevolence also means we have to assume there's benevolence and that there is also neutrality, as well. And perhaps it's been the benevolent and the neutral that has helped us to build our culture and to grow and to thrive and to create new great technologies and perhaps better systems and all the things, right? Even defensive capabilities and so forth. And that would be a good thing. But we don't know, right? We don't know. So, but to create a fear, even if there was a malevolent out there, right? A malevolent, species, right? Well, alligators, get close to an alligator or a crocodile. It's going to be malevolent, right? It sees you as, oh, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat you. Do the same thing with a tiger, a lion. Don't we have malevolence all around us? Go into some organizations. There's some malevolence running organizations right now. There are whole cities and whole parts of countries and so forth and so on who are malevolent toward us all the time. All the time. Do you think more malevolence is really going to freak us out anymore than the malevolence that we already have? We can't already completely neutralize and at least calm down the malevolence that's out there already. Do you think one more? I think it would just be like us going, okay, well, there's that. Ultimately, we have to kind of get over it, right? Maybe it's time that we have to address it. And maybe there's a fear of, well, there'll be a panic and all this kind of stuff. I don't think so. I think you've already observed a lot of the panics. They're called our world wars. They're called all the things that have happened up to this point, right? They're called all the struggles and strife that we've had. Life has been a trail of malevolence, with some beauty, really amazing beauty threaded in between all of it. And a lot of the things that we think is, well, Earth is a benevolent place and it's beautiful, and it is. But that doesn't mean there isn't malevolence here, folks. And we can't deny our own intelligence. We can't gaslight our intelligence or our intuition to think that there's complete benevolence here and that there would be complete benevolence in the universe, right? That would be silly, right? There's a playground and there's tons of kids. I remember being a little kid running around the playground. There's always one or two kids getting in a fight. There's always malevolence everywhere at some scale. You could call it the 80-20 rule. Maybe it's less than that, but there's always malevolence. So I think that culture has achieved the level of awareness and understanding to say, look, if I can understand that 20% of the culture is pretty much narcissistic, scattered about from leaders that are some, I'm not saying all, but I'm saying that, a percentage of that 20 is some leaders, and a percentage is probably just random folk out there. If I can, see that as a plausibility, I think that most humans can plausibly understand that there's an intelligence out there. They can deal with that intelligence, both benevolent and malevolent, and deal with the reality of the playground we're playing in, because we're really children playing in that sandbox to assume otherwise. If teachers are telling us, well, there's nothing out there in the world is completely, empty, it's completely void of nothing, of anything intelligent, it's just all of you in this sandbox, right? Feeding us a delusion. So we have to be aware that we don't gaslight our intuition, we don't gaslight our intelligence, and we don't gaslight our emotions. We have to deal with all of them and understand that when we start to feel a little bit uptight, that's some fear. And then ask ourselves, where is that fear coming from, right? And then deal with that. Deal with that. All right, folks, just a little detour of videos. I don't even know how I'm going to title this one, but I do find it fascinating. I'm not, I'm open to the concept that there's an intelligence out there or already here that has either been helping us, that has already helped us, that is coming, or that we haven't. Either way, here, not here, down the road, way down the road, I'm completely open and vulnerable to any of that information. So, and open to the possibility. If we're open to the possibility, there's way less fear, because then it allows us to intellectually and emotionally deal with it in a healthy way. And if we deal with things in a healthy way, personally, culturally, universally, entirely, right, then we're better off, and we want to be better off. And on that note, remember, folks, hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day or more to uplift, motivate, inspire, just encourage one another. What you're going to find is the more we do this, the more we help to transform culture and improve things. And we do so in our own lives when we do that. Remember, we can't transform anything on the outside if we're not willing to transform on the inside. All right, folks, have a fantastic day. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.